People love to call frugal folks cheap. But those two words are not the same. Not even close. One is a mindset and the other is a habit. One builds wealth and the other burns bridges. Yet somewhere along the way, we started mixing them up. We started calling careful people stingy. We started treating smart spenders like Scrooges. And that little mix-up costs regular people a lot of money. Because when you think frugal equals cheap, you avoid being frugal. You spend to look normal and you stay broke to look generous. Today, we're clearing that up for good. By the end, you'll see frugal people in a whole new light. And you might even want to become one. Let's start with the biggest myth of all, the one almost everyone believes without thinking. The myth is simple: frugal people just hate spending money. But that's not true at all. Frugal people love spending money on things that matter to them. What they hate is wasting it on things that don't. That's the entire difference right there in one line. A cheap person avoids spending at all costs, even when the cost is real. A frugal person spends carefully and often spends more on the right things. Think about a cheap friend who skips the tip at dinner. Now think about a frugal friend who tips well but skips the $14 cocktail. Same bill total, very different values. One cuts corners on people, the other cuts corners on stuff. That's the heart of the whole idea. Frugal is about value. Cheap is about price only. Here's the simple math that shows it. Say two people each earn $60,000 a year. The cheap one saves $200 a month by underpaying everyone around them. The frugal one saves $200 a month by cutting 3 subscriptions they never use. Same $2,400 saved in a year, but only one of them still has friends by December. That's a big deal, and we'll come back to it, because relationships pay dividends too, just in a quieter way. Now let's talk about quality, because this is where cheap people really lose money. Cheap buys the lowest price every single time. Frugal buys the best value, which is a very different calculation. Value looks at price, quality, lifespan, and how often you'll use it. Picture 2 pairs of work boots side by side. One pair costs $40 and lasts 6 months. The other pair costs $160 and lasts 4 years. Cheap grabs the $40 pair without thinking. Frugal does the math first. 40 times 8 replacements is $320 over 4 years. The expensive boots actually cost half as much over time, and they're more comfortable the whole way through. This is called the boots theory, and it shows up everywhere. Cheap tools, cheap shoes, cheap mattresses, cheap tires. Buying the cheapest option often means buying it twice, or 3 times, or forever. Frugal people spend more upfront to spend less overall. That's not cheap, that's careful. Let's talk about food, because this is where the myth really breaks down. People assume frugal means ramen for every meal. But real frugal eating looks nothing like that. Frugal people cook at home most nights, and they cook well. They buy rice, beans, oats, eggs, frozen vegetables, and whatever meat is on sale. A week of home-cooked meals can run about $60 per person. That same week of takeout easily hits $180 or more. That's $120 saved every single week. Over a year, that's $6,240 back in your pocket, not from suffering, just from cooking. And here's the part people miss. Home cooking is usually healthier, tastier, and more satisfying. Frugal people aren't punishing themselves at dinner. They're eating better food for less money. Cheap people, on the other hand, might skip meals to save a few bucks, or eat the same sad thing every day out of stubbornness. See the difference? One is smart, the other is grim. Now let's tackle the generosity myth head on. People think frugal folks are bad tippers and worse gift givers. But studies and everyday experience suggest the opposite. People who manage money well often give more, not less. Why? Because they actually have money to give. A cheap person clings to every dollar because they feel poor inside. A frugal person shares freely because they feel secure. Here's what that looks like at a birthday dinner. The cheap friend argues about splitting the bill down to the penny. The frugal friend covers the birthday person's meal without blinking because they planned for it and it fits their budget. Frugal is not the enemy of generosity, cheap is. And the people around you can feel that difference right away. One makes the room lighter, the other makes it tense. Let's talk about time, because cheap and frugal handle time very differently. Cheap people will drive across town to save $2 on gas. They'll spend an hour clipping coupons to save $3.50. They'll waste a whole Saturday chasing a small deal. Frugal people value their time as much as their money. They ask a simple question: is this saving worth the hours? If cutting your own hair saves $30 and takes 20 minutes, that's a great trade. If driving 40 minutes saves you $2, that's a terrible trade. Frugal people run this math in their head automatically. That's why they seem relaxed, not stressed about money. They're not chasing every penny, they're catching the big ones. Cheap is exhausting, frugal is calm. That calm is one of the biggest hidden rewards of doing this well, and you can feel it the moment you start living that way. Now let's talk about the subscription trap, because this is a modern money leak. The average person has about $200 a month in subscriptions they barely use. Streaming, apps, memberships, cloud storage, free trials that quietly turned into paid ones. That's $2,400 a year draining out of your account. A cheap person wouldn't sign up for any of it, even the ones they'd use. A frugal person keeps the two they actually love and cuts the rest. Say you cancel one $60 subscription you never watch. That's $720 a year, or $7,200 over 10 years. And $7,200 is a used car or an emergency fund, or a good vacation, from canceling one thing you already didn't want. That's the frugal move in one clean example. Cut the waste, keep the good stuff. You don't need to live like a monk. You just need to notice what's leaving your account. Because most money doesn't disappear in big moments. It slips out $5 at a time. Let's talk about the coffee question, since everyone brings it up. Should you give up your $5 daily coffee? A cheap person would say yes, no exceptions. A frugal person would ask you a better question. Do you actually love it, or is it just a habit? If you love it, keep it and cut somewhere else. If it's just autopilot, that $5 a day is $1,825 a year. That's a real number, and it adds up fast. The point isn't to cut coffee. The point is to cut what you don't care about. Frugal people protect the small joys that make life good. They cut hard on the stuff that doesn't move the needle. Cheap people cut everything and enjoy nothing, and then they wonder why saving feels so miserable. It doesn't have to feel that way. Frugal living, done right, feels freeing. Here's another place cheap and frugal split hard. It's how they treat professionals. Cheap tries to talk the plumber down to half price, or skips the mechanic and lets the car problem get worse. Or buys the $19 knockoff tool that breaks on the second use. Frugal pays fair rates for good work, because good work saves money later. A $200 plumbing repair beats a $3,000 water damage bill. A $150 tune-up beats a $2,500 engine replacement. Frugal people know that skipping maintenance is the most expensive habit of all. They pay small bills now to avoid huge bills later. Cheap thinks short-term and pays long-term. Frugal thinks long-term and saves both. That mindset shift alone can change your whole financial life, and it costs you nothing to start today. Now let's talk about the emotional side, because money is emotional. Cheap often comes from fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing what you have, fear of the future. That fear makes people grip tightly, even when it hurts them. Frugal usually comes from clarity about what matters and what doesn't. A frugal person knows their goals, their values, and their numbers. They spend and save in a way that lines up with all three. That's why frugal people seem so steady with money. They're not anxious, they're aligned. Cheap feels heavy, frugal feels light. And that lightness is contagious in the best way. Your partner notices, your kids notice, your friends notice. Money stops being a source of stress. It becomes a tool you actually control. Let's put some real numbers on the frugal lifestyle. Say you save just $500 a month by being smart, not cheap. Cooking more, cutting 3 subscriptions, buying quality instead of junk. That's $6,000 a year without missing your daily coffee. Over 10 years without any investing at all, that's $60,000. With modest growth and a boring savings account, more. That's not cheap living. That's smart living, quietly building a real cushion. Meanwhile, a cheap person who fights everyone over pennies might save the same amount, but they'll have worse relationships, worse stuff, and worse health. Same savings, very different life. That's the whole point of this video. The money is only half the story. The life around it is the other half. So how do you actually become frugal without slipping into cheap? Start with a simple rule. Ask 2 questions before every purchase. First, do I actually value this? Second, is this the best version I can afford of it? If the answer to both is yes, buy it without guilt. If the answer is no, walk away without regret. That's it, the whole system. You'll find yourself spending more on some things and way less on others, and your total spending will still drop, often by a lot. Because most of what we buy fails both tests. We just never stop to ask. Try this for 1 week and watch what happens. You'll spot money leaks you never noticed before. Here's the last piece, and it might be the most important one. Frugal people are not trying to impress anyone. That's the quiet superpower behind all of it. They don't buy cars to signal success. They don't buy clothes to prove they've made it. They don't upgrade phones every year to keep up. They spend on what they actually enjoy and ignore the rest. That freedom from status spending is where the real money is. The average person spends thousands a year just to look a certain way. Frugal people opt out of that game entirely. And they end up with more money, more time, and more peace. Not because they're cheap, because they're clear. So the next time someone calls a careful person cheap, you'll know better. Cheap is small, tense, and short-sighted. Frugal is calm, patient, and generous with what matters. One is about hoarding, the other is about aligning. You don't have to change everything overnight to get there. Pick one habit this week, just one. Cancel a subscription you don't use. Cook 3 meals at home instead of ordering. Buy the better version of something you'll use for years. Or simply pause before your next purchase and ask those 2 questions. Small choices made on repeat become a whole different financial life. And that life is quieter, freer, and richer than most people ever realize. Frugal isn't cheap. Frugal is smart. And now you know the difference.